Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome from me to all of you who joined our panel. Thank you so much for the effort to be here and listen to our views on this very exciting topic. We have discussed different panels today, different topics, different kind of emerging threats, and how to partner against them, how to tackle them. But this panel will specifically dive deep into law enforcement, forensic, and public-private partnerships to fight cybercrime. And my name is Pavlina Pavlova. I'm the Share the Mic in Cyber Fellow at NewAmerica in Washington, D.C. And today I will be your moderator for this wonderful session. This event takes place amid rapid changes in the frequency, scale, and sophistication of cyber attacks. The lines between state actors and cyber criminals blur because cyber criminals get wider access to capabilities and they can do more offensive operations. At the same time, malicious actors increasingly target critical infrastructure, which has dire impacts on businesses and citizens alike. And the damage wrought by cybercrime has a very important human component, which we'll also discuss today. For example, when a cyber attack attacks healthcare infrastructure or transportation or communication services, the impact on people is very severe, and it influences their safety, their well-being, security. So cybercrime has this very inherent transnational dynamics. It's not that one actor, whether it's a state or a private sector, can tackle it alone, and partnerships in this space are key. So today we will speak about effective responses to this threat, and we'll dive into what are the threats we are facing, but more importantly, what are the solutions, and how these solutions may be changing because the landscape of cybercrime is developing and it's fast changing. And I have the most wonderful speakers to address this topic. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Paul Foster, Acting Director of Threat Leadership, National Crime Agency at the United Kingdom. We have with us also Mike Lashlee, Chief Security Officer at Mastercard. It's my great pleasure to welcome Jean-Phillippe Lecouffe, Deputy Executive Director at Europol. Thank you very much for coming. Our fourth speaker today is Newell, Chief of the National Security Cyber Section at the US Department of Justice. Thank you very much for joining. And Leroy Terrelonge, Vice President-Analyst Cyber Credit Risk at Moody's, and also member of Paris Europlace. We have a great opportunity to get these amazing views from, as you must see, diverse panel. We have represented Europol, we have national state agencies, and we have also the private sector from the financial side of things. So let's dive into the first question. We'll set the scene about what cybercrime landscape are we seeing, and we'll start from the states. So my first question would be to you, Paul. How do you see the ever-changing landscape of cybercrime? As a state, you must have a very clear view of what is happening. You do have the capacities which other actors do not have. At the other hand, private sector has its own capabilities and challenges, and also technical means, which will be discussed as a complementary to the national view. So what is the national perspective, and what is also maybe comparison with a global landscape? Is it shared threat, or are the threats different for national agencies?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the invite. So I'm Paul Foster from the National Crime Agency. I'm head of our National Cybercrime Unit, and that's a big question, and we could probably spend the whole panel just debating that one, so I'll try and be quick, because my colleagues will have some fascinating views too. So the National Crime Agency is the UK's lead law enforcement agency tackling serious and organised crime. Our mission is to protect the public from serious and organised crime, and our approach is fundamentally based on an online, upstream and overseas strategy. So that means tackling the highest harm threats, and you'll note within that specifically we're looking at all of the online angles, which includes cybercrime. The scale of that online threat for us is a huge and significant challenge, because actually when you consider our strategy, we are inherently upstream and we have a huge overseas network. But the delta between where we are at the moment as an organisation in terms of our capacity and capability and the scale of the online threat really concerns us, because like many people in law enforcement, perhaps in the room, we grew up in a more conventional way, and we have got thousands of officers that we need to upskill to meet what is arguably the biggest threat facing law enforcement. And if I can just draw a couple of examples across, I think, that threat landscape, in the purest cyber sense, we can consider ransomware. That's a tier 1 national security threat for us in the UK, a huge challenge. You'll have seen recently the multi-agency international operation against Lockbit, which is a great example of tackling ransomware in the purest cyber, significant high harm end. But similarly, we recognise the manifestations of this threat cover all areas of serious and organised crime and into other spectrums of national security, fraud, child abuse, the list goes on. And I think what we're looking to try and do is design an organisation that is able to tackle that end-to-end scale of all online harms. And of course, the only way we can do that is in collaboration with our colleagues across law enforcement and notably public-private partnerships. So a huge scale and a really important journey ahead of us.
Thank you very much. And you touch upon ransomware as one of the key threats, and we know that actually US is leading many of the efforts on ransomware, such as Ransomware Task Force and others, which are putting together big coalitions of various actors. So Sean, what is the US perspective? Are these, would you say is it similar, is the same, is it different? And what are the top priorities for the US?
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming today and for having me here. It's great to be on the panel with such a distinguished group of individuals. So to answer your question, we at DOJ see many of the same things that our colleagues in the UK are seeing, obviously, and we're often working with them and others in Europol and across the globe to counter these issues. So I work in the national security cyber section, and that kind of shows how DOJ sees the world in cyber. We have certain folks in our team who focus on the transnational cyber criminal organizations, like the ransomware groups that you mentioned. We also have members of our team at DOJ, the team I lead, which focuses on the nation-state threats. But the scale is an issue, and what we see is being extremely problematic, and we'll use the ransomware ecosystem as a good example of this. It's just the barriers to entry are lowered. Ransomware as a service is a great example of that, where you don't need to be a hacker with all the skills that are required to compromise an organization. You can outsource some of those skills to those as long as you're willing to pay for them or give them a cut of the proceeds. And we see that is part of the problem, and that's causing the scale of this problem to increase. Also on the nation-state side of the house, we're also seeing lower barrier of entries, and particularly in the commercial spyware sector, where countries that might not have the capabilities to develop offensive cyber operations are able to, again, pay someone who can provide them with those capabilities and then use those capabilities in a manner that doesn't follow the rule of law or necessarily align with democratic values. So as far as our priorities go, I like to put them in two different buckets. On the criminal side, again, ransomware is our #1 priority. Again, we are treating this as a national security threat within the United States government, using all tools of the government and all partnerships available to us, both with foreign partners and private sector. And on the nation-state side of the house, the two threats that we are prioritizing right now are the targeting of our critical infrastructure. We have a lot of discussion of that in the press recently in the United States, where actors are gaining access to critical infrastructure, not to necessarily attack it now, but to hold that critical infrastructure at risk for a time of their choosing in the future, and we're attempting to root that out. And I can talk a little bit about that later in some more detail, but we're also looking at the targeting of democratic processes and institutions. 2024, it's an election year in the United States. We know that threat actors, particularly from Russia, and Iran, I would add that too, have in the past targeted our electoral processes, and we're on the lookout this year especially for that in the future. So I would say those are our two priorities right now, and we're looking, I think, also as prosecutors and law enforcement agents, we'd like to look at this as a problem that we cannot prosecute our way out of. We're always going to try to arrest these individuals, but we recognize that many of them are in safe havens in Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, elsewhere, even if they don't work for those governments, they're still relying on them for a safe place to commit their criminal activity from. And so we are looking to disrupt their activities, not necessarily arrest them. Maybe many years down the road we will, but right now we're just trying to do everything we can to disrupt their activities and provide network defenders with breathing space so they can protect their networks.
Thank you very much, Sean. And so we see some some key trends such as ransomware, critical infrastructure, democratic processes. It says that the list is getting longer and longer on on potential cyber threats and the impacts which may just show in years ahead, and they are not clear now. And Europol has very unique role as a law enforcement agency of the European Union. It serves as a central hub for coordinating criminal intelligence. And it would be very interesting to hear how is the view of cybercrime from an agency such as Europol. What may be the shared threats that the EU is seeing, but also what are the kind of opportunities and limits into looking into cybercrime landscape from a position of Europol, if you may, Jean-Phillippe.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be also with this panel where we have a lot of people with which we cooperate on nearly a daily basis. Well, what we see, in fact, and what is the most striking fact is the scale of this. And it's, well, we often refer to the biggest cyber attacks or ransomware against companies or governments and so on. But we have to be really conscious that this is now impacting a lot of our citizens in our nations. It's nearly every day that you can receive an email for phishing and so on. So the scale of it, the number of criminals, of cyber criminals behind it, the number of cases and the number of victims are really something that is striking. It's touched the business, but also in your private life. So it's really one of the main things. It has been said also, but I want to emphasize also that now there's a low threshold to really be part of the game as a criminal, because you can hire all the devices. And when we met with the NCA and the FBI and DOJ about Logbit. This operation Kronos, what we have seen is the business model of this organization was to sell, in fact, all the product to commit ransomware attacks. But in fact, they didn't did it by themselves. They just provided the tools, and everybody can, all the affiliates, and we have found hundreds, we can say, of affiliates can really hire these services, these criminal services. So this is really something that is striking. What is striking also is the young age of the perpetrators. Mm-hmm. You have the big criminal groups, the advanced persistent threat, the APTs and so on, but you have also a lot of young guys trying to earn money doing that in every places in the world. And there's really younger perpetrators with easy access to the tool to do things. And very difficult to reach out to them, to arrest them. It's why we have strategies about infrastructures, attacking infrastructures, but also trying to arrest these targets, but also to trying to follow the money, which is something I will come on later. One thing also that I would like to emphasize is that all these criminals, to communicate between them, they use tools, because they need, as all criminals, they need to communicate between them. And they use encrypted tools to do that, encrypted networks of communication. And we have a problem that we are all at the EU level, but also I know that in the US there's a lot of discussion about what we call the lawful access. How we as law enforcement, we can better protect our citizens by accessing to some systems of communication where we know that criminals are widely exchanging. I don't quote any, but I guess that some of you have in mind what I'm talking about.
Thank you very much. And we discuss attacks on parts of critical infrastructure. We also discuss how financial crime is important part of the puzzle, and how for these kind of crimes the average age of attackers may be still lowering, and this may be part globally. This may be part of some regions specifically, or some countries, especially with, for example, high level of unemployment or other contextual issues. I would be very happy to hear more about it. So to put it into context, why we are seeing these kind of threats, and also understanding where we can be going with them. And we have a great opportunity to hear from Mike, who is Chief Security Officer at Mastercard, because financial crime being among the key threats, at the same time, financial sector as parts of critical infrastructure is one of the most mature parts of critical infrastructure. So how do you see these threats? What may be also, if you can compare, what may be positioning financial sector differently than other parts of critical infrastructure? And then what is your specific perspective as private actor into the threat landscape?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And it's, again, a very deep question. Again, I'm Mike Lashlee. I'm the Chief Security Officer for Mastercard. I've been with Mastercard for 8 years, but before I came to Mastercard, I was almost 30 years with the U.S. government. I was a federal agent for 28 years, and so I have a little bit of a unique perspective on the public and private side of the question. That's why I'm really happy to be on this panel, because I think the partnership between the two is going to be critical going forward. When it comes to the threat landscape, and it's already been mentioned, and I can only double down on it to say things like ransomware and fraud are not going away. They're only growing. They continue to be the bread and butter of the threat actors that we see, and that we have to fight against every day. So that threat is there. It's going to continue to be there. It's going to continue to grow. You heard about AI today. We'll talk about AI tomorrow, next week, next month. The AI is the flavor of the day. I can say from what we're seeing today, it is an emerging threat, but not something from the perspective of seeing complicated, very highly technical AI threats at the moment, though we do feel those are coming. But one of the things that we do see today, and it has been a shift in our industry, is the traditional fraud threats, people trying to get into networks like Mastercard, other payment systems, financial institutions for financial crimes, just to steal money, data and money. You mentioned us being part of the critical infrastructure, and whether we are designated as national critical infrastructure or just de facto critical infrastructure, nation states now are looking at companies in the financial sector and looking to impose their geopolitical will by either disrupting the payment systems or pre-positioning malware, which was mentioned, for potential later use. And so now as a private company, we have had to pivot from protecting our own walls, being good defense against cyber criminals, to now defending against nation states. And that's a tall task for any private corporation. And so we have to partner. We have to partner across our industry. We have to partner across sectors because, again, not only the financial sector is impacted, but as an example, if the communication sector was impacted or the energy sector was impacted, we have interdependencies between those sectors. So we have to work together to defend critical infrastructure. And one of the ways we can do that, and as I talk to law enforcement and intelligence agencies around the globe, I find that law enforcement agencies for countries, even Europol, are very good within their region. Nobody knows what is happening within their borders better than they do. And it's important for a company like Mastercard to understand what those threats are, know the local lay of the land, the IOCs, the TTPs that are happening there. But what we can bring to the conversation is a global view. So at Mastercard, we have a global payment system. So I can see a cyber risk or fraud risk that's happening in Peru, and then see it again happen in Ghana, and then see it again happen in Australia, and come to France and say, hey, we're seeing this trend globally. And we're starting to see the beginning of that wave now in your location. So that global network gives us a unique view that we can share with those local law enforcement partners to protect themselves. And so it really is a team game going forward. None of us can stand this alone. I think even countries, governments need the private sector to weigh in with the information that they have, the expertise. And certainly we're going to need that information and expertise and partnership from the public sector. And I also want to pivot to a different type of threat that I think is important. We're talking about technical threats here. The talent gap is a threat to our industry. The lack of trained professionals who we can bring into the battle every day to combat against these nation states, to combat against criminal groups. Again, it's not something we can hire our way out of. We need to develop the next generation of cyber talent and look for creative ways to do that. So I think that is a threat just as much as an APT to our industry.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy that you brought the very human level, and I spoke about the threats and the impacts on people, how cybercrime is impacting individuals and communities, but at the same time, you have the human level also on the defense side. Well, what are the gaps there? Because we always, I just feel that with cybercrime and cyber security as such, it's sometimes perceived as very detached, it's very technical, but it's very human. And we will speak about the human connection in partnership later on our panel. And we see some very interesting threats. On one hand, nation-state threats to financial institutions, so state actors being more active with their cyber operations, and at the same time, cybercrime, especially ransomware, organized cybercrime, which is raising to the level of national security and is ringing an alarm there. Is that, and that would be my question to you, Leroy, as someone representing the Moody's, is that threatening financial stability is financial stability can be threatened through cybercrime, or is cybercrime still on very lower individual level? How do you see the threat?
Hi, yes, I'm Leroy Terrelonge from Moody's, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today. The answer is both. It's both on, well, I guess maybe three. You have individuals, you have organizations, and then you also have the national or macroeconomic context. So just to give you a sense of what I'm doing here on this panel, I work for Moody's, a credit rating agency. So when organizations need to raise money, they come to us and ask us to provide a rating that will tell people how likely it is they'll pay back that money on time and in full. And so what we have been seeing over the past number of years is that, cyber attacks are nothing new, but starting around the mid-2010s, around the time where ransomware actors decided that it was more profitable to target large organizations rather than grandmas and individual people charging them 300 euros to recover their family photos, that they started targeting large organizations. And so that has had much more of a financial impact on these organizations than other types of attacks in the past. So we had basically 0 credit rating actions related to cyber security or cyber incidents before the middle of the 2010s. And then since then, we've had about 19. Now, 19 is a pretty low number, relatively. We rate thousands of organizations, but we're seeing the impact grow over time as attacks are becoming more severe and as technology is evolving. So on the individual organization side, what we're seeing usually is that business interruption is one of the largest sources of that financial impact. And so that has resulted, again, in a number of credit rating actions that have taken place. But we're also seeing some concerns about financial stability. There was a report from the IMF a couple of weeks ago that was talking about some of these concerns to the financial system. And just to give a quote from the Federal Reserve, in 2017 there was the large NotPetya cyber attack, and the Federal Reserve published a report a couple of years ago saying that based on the research, there were a number of organizations that saw their liquidity ratios decline after the attack because they had to spend money to remediate it, and so they went to their banks and asked them to give them some lines of credit. So they drew down their credit lines at banks, and then this imposed additional costs because when they went to renew them, the banks gave it back to them at a higher rate. And so, banks were a great source of liquidity during this attack. There were a large number of victims, but if there were even a larger number of victims, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that banks could be overwhelmed by the financial needs that would be requested. And so that's our concern from a financial stability standpoint.
Thank you very much. So we spoke about the increasing complexity of cybercrime and the increasing impact on both security but also individual level. And we'll now move to responses, which are a very interesting part of our panel because they are forward-looking, they are very action-oriented. What can we do seeing these threats? And I just wanted to remind to the audience, just get your questions ready. It would be great to have a conversation. We'll devote chunk of this panel, some 15 to 20 minutes, to your questions. So please think about them now, and we'll go to a couple more questions, and then we'll turn to you as our audience for your questions to the panelists, and you may address them to specific speakers or just address the panel as such. And we're very much looking forward to your views and what you are interested in the specificities of this panel. And let's start from an organization which has international cooperation at its heart. Let's start with Europol. Partnerships and success stories that Europol can speak about. How do you ensure effective collaboration between law enforcement agencies? It must be also difficult seeing different, or do we see different kind of maturity in national law enforcement? How to incentivize cooperation between countries, and what are the capacities from the private sector and also other stakeholders, if you work with them as Europol, to have effective partnerships combating cybercrime?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's true that Europol, our main goal is really to incite and to push for international cooperation of law enforcement. We are here to support the law enforcement agencies of the 27 member states in their investigation, but also with our operational partners, and there's a lot around this table here. It's 25 years that Europol was created, 25 years ago. It's our anniversary this year, and it's 10 years, it was 10 years last year that we have created the European Cybercrime Center. And it was really built around the idea that we have to put people around the table to make them work together. So how do we do that? Well, it's sometimes complicated because it's, I often say that it's a little miracle every day that we are doing, because we don't speak the same language in the 27 member states. We don't have the same legal framework, we don't have the same cultural background, and we don't have the same way of doing policing. But in fact, and including with our partners, we find a way. We find a way to work together, because we are strong believers that it's by having meetings, trying to coordinate, to collaborate, to exchange information, that we can really team up in front of these kind of threats. And for cyber, the threat is global. You have seen that, and you said that. And so from the beginning, from the very beginning, we have been building this community, not only with the law enforcement agencies, but also with the cybersecurity world, which is something that we need to work on so far, because there are also things to do in order to have better exchange, and with the private sector. From the beginning, for example, in cyber, we have advisory groups. Mastercard is part of our advisory group for 4 years about what are the threats, to have the global view that you were talking about. And our executive director was last week invited to the inauguration of one of your centers in Belgium. So this is this kind of great partnership. We have partnered with NCA, for example, and DOJ in the big cases that we had recently. So we try really to connect. It's about connecting people, making them work together, exchanging information, create a kind of a trustful environment where they can exchange information, and then we can build the cases. It's very important. We have successes in doing that. This Operation Chronos about Logbit was a success. Maybe some of you have heard last week about Operation Endgame, where we had more 100 servers that were taken down in, I don't have in mind the exact number, but around 25 to 30 countries. We had action in Ukraine, we had action in Germany, in France, and so on. So it's the kind of thing that we can do, coordinating cases at a global level. I think it's working. It's working because everybody is aware that it's only through cooperation, through collaboration, that we can do that. In the case of Operation Chronos, I was in London because it was coordinated by the NCA at that moment. So sometimes we are partners, sometimes we are the central piece of it, but for sure, in this matter, it's key that we know each other, we create trust between us because we work together. And for law enforcement, as some of you, if you are part of law enforcement, you know that these personal relations that are built around one cases can last for the whole life. And then it's from this point, this human relation, with the support of an organization, because you are fully dedicated to that. Our budget is done for that. Our resources, our capacities, our expertise are free to be used by our member state, by our operational partners. And it's what Europol is doing every day.
Thank you very much, and it's very interesting to hear about the trusted circles for sharing information and how to do it more effectively. And you turn to our colleague from the UK. So I would go to you, Paul, with the same question, and also sub-question on: has anything changed with the UK leaving the European Union on a cooperation level there? And do you see a change, or on this very practical matter on combating cybercrime, there's the information sharing and the trusted partnerships, and SATA did not get impacted in the way of this change? And how do you see the key partners as a national actor? Who are they?
Okay, thank you. So I might take those backwards a little bit. So the key partners question, I mean, I'm going to really sit on the fence here because there are just so many. So, I mean, inevitably, the US and the agencies in the US bring a strength and volume that is hugely powerful. But then Europol bring a coordination and effort that is just of huge value in fighting cybercrime. And then I could call out others. The German and the Dutch national agencies are brilliant with data. But it would be unfair just to single those out when so many countries and organisations can contribute to tackling the threat. I think that speaks to the point, actually, that Jean-Phillippe makes, though, doesn't it? The criticality of trusted partnerships is, if we took a phrase away from this, regardless of public-private, I think trusted partnerships would probably be the most important strategy we could walk away with. To work backwards through your question, though, into the question about us leaving the European Union, personally, I was sad to leave, but we're still here, and I'm with you, which is great. I think we did see an inevitable short-term slowdown in some of the capabilities that we had access to. You know, it was a concern for us. It was a bit of a security kick. It was one of the reasons why a number of people didn't want to leave the European Union. But what it encouraged us to do is to further build our bilateral relationships, to invest in other critical partnerships. And actually, it's with thanks to the likes of Europol and our other international partners that we are still able to collaborate and cooperate on a global scale. And it's important, I think, to think about the fact that those collaborations can come in unique places. So if I reference the US again, if you think about Washington, if we go to Washington, we don't just bilat with the US when we're in Washington. We can meet with just about any other country or organization in Washington as well. So I actually don't think we're any worse off now, but we had to work hard through that period. And then I want to come back to the bit at the very start is, what's that point of effective strategies? And I think going to the point of trust, to get to trust, you need a common language. You need a framework that everybody understands and can buy into. And I think what we've achieved in cybercrime over the last couple of years, especially, certainly post the pandemic, is a common language and a common narrative that the vast majority of organizations sign up to. So you will hear people talk about the cyber criminal ecosystem. You will hear us reference goods, services, anonymization tools, all those things that underpin the manifestations of the threat. So 7-8 years ago, we were all talking about DDoS. More recently, it's ransomware. Who knows what the AI-enabled threat might be in the future? But the things that underpin that are those tools, those services, those goods, and that anonymity that cyber criminals rely on. And I think the fact that we've got that common language and that common strategy where we're trying to dismantle and disrupt those key parts of the cyber criminal ecosystem is a foundation on which we can build that trust and that collaboration that hopefully enables us to be effective as a group.
Pavlina, if I might jump in on that one. I think, hearing our colleagues from Europol and NCA talk, I get very jealous because, I work, as I mentioned at the outset, in the nation state arena and countering nation state threats. And I have colleagues in the Department of Justice who focus on the cyber threat, the transnational criminal organizations. And these international partnerships, these private sector partnerships are very mature in the context of transnational criminal organizations. And I want to try to, and one of my goals at DOJ is to try to bring a similar collaboration to the nation state APT world. Because I feel like right now that is lacking. There's lots of bilateral cooperation. The United States will cooperate very well with France on investigation, will cooperate with Germany on investigation, Japan, South Korea, but it's just one-off cooperation with one country. And I think organizations like Europol that can bring together multiple countries on a multilateral model is something that is required against all types of crime, whether state-sponsored or not, and we're lacking that right now in the nation-state context. And that trust, we need to build that trust so it's more than just bilateral relationships, but it's multilateral discussions amongst governments. And, I think I'll also point as well to the private sector. I think there is a lot of similar issues in the private sector. Very, very good cooperation against those transnational cyber criminal organizations, some cooperation against the nation-states, but again, not bringing everyone together as one-off bilateral relationships.
And if I can just come in as well, I think Mike mentioned earlier about how challenging it is for an organization such as Mastercard when you've got those high-end threats that you're trying to tackle as well as cyber criminal. And then to Sean's point there, actually, I think we're starting to see a unique challenge where it's often difficult to attribute where the threat has actually come from. And that definition of what is a cyber criminal and where it's a criminal act versus a state-sponsored act is increasingly complex. I think when we wrote our last National Strategic Assessment for Cybercrime in the UK, we were clear to say that our assessment at that point was that we didn't feel that these criminal actors were directed by rogue states, but we felt that they were broadly tolerated. Yet over the last 6 months, I think especially, we've seen more and more information and intelligence, much of which is open source, and some really strange behaviors. The Ermakov, the threat actor that did the Medibank one in Australia, got sanctioned and then got arrested by the Russians. So it's hugely, hugely strange. And I think there's probably something there for us to look at how we come together, because it might be, to Sean's world, that our existing partnerships that are more criminally focused create opportunity for us to achieve some of those goals that he speaks about.
Thank you very much. And it's definitely one of the key threats to do the attribution, and then also recognize, because these because whether it's nation state or whether it's cyber criminal group, the frameworks, the legal frameworks around it, the normative frameworks of behavior are treated separately, and there is more and more overlap. And these discussions we'll essentially need to find more powerful accountability tools to prevent this kind of cyber attacks and also very enabled nation state or proxies attacks, which are getting on not only country to country level, but country to individual level increasingly. And so thank you very much for this wonderful overview. And and I wanted to move to the financial sector. We spoke about having common language and having common narrative. So how is it for Mastercard as a big private actor in this space? How do you see your key partnerships, and how do you see also the demand and offer as you engage in those partnerships combating cybercrime?
Yeah, well, we see those partnerships on a lot of different levels. And one, all these conversations are fantastic, but if we don't take these good intent and turn them into action, then we failed. And so the way we approach that at Mastercard is actually to create physical collaborative centers. We're taking a page out of the government's handbooks and creating fusion centers where we can bring up to 28 different business units from Mastercard to operate from the same location. It allows us to have a great view of crime and fraud across the entire organization. And if we have an issue, we have all the players we need to deal with that problem already in the room, whether they be legal, fraud, security operations, whatever. So we built our first one in St. Louis back in 2017. What was interesting, though, was the very first year we built that fusion center, as we began to work with law enforcement and get information to protect Mastercard, because we had this collective consciousness of the issue, we realized that the information we were pulling in to protect Mastercard was also very valuable to our customers, other banks, other financial institutions. And in sharing that through the Fusion Center, we saved over $100 million the first year, just coincidentally. Well, we've just came last week from Brussels, from Waterloo, actually, where we opened our European Cyber Resilience Center. It's the same Fusion Center concept, but purposefully built now to also partner externally, because again, the value is not just internal to Mastercard, it really is with working with all these partners, such as NATO, Europol, Interpol, and CIC up there, who we want to come visit with us, the National Crime Agency. So we've got a physical space where all of the relevant internal players can operate, our intelligence teams, crisis management teams, forensic analysts, and now we want to bring in external partners and train, work together on crisis, work together to help those workforce issues, to train the new generation, to exchange intelligence. So that's one way that we partner. Another way we partner, recently we just held a tri-sector exercise in the United States. So again, we're talking about partnership between public and private entities. It's important also that we partner across sectors. We have very good relationships within the financial sector, but if the communication sector or the power sector is impacted as a critical infrastructure, that's going to impact our way of doing business as well. So what we did in Washington, we have a cyber range where we can safely attack and defend each other. We brought in 2 partners from the financial sector, 2 partners from the communication sector, 2 partners from the energy sector, and worked with the CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Department of Homeland Security and Treasury, and created an entity that a nation state attacked, and we practiced from a technical level with SOC analysts and vulnerability management analysts how to defend that critical infrastructure. And then on the second day, we brought in other CISOs like myself and the sector leads, and talked about it as if it was a crisis management exercise. So we did both the technical and the more the crisis management piece. So that's how we partner across sectors. And then the last way is with a group we haven't talked too much about now, and that's the NGOs, the not-for-profits. There's a whole other group of experts out there and people who care about cybersecurity that we need to partner with. And as an example, we partner with the Global Cyber Alliance to create the cybersecurity toolkit for small businesses. It's something that small businesses can have for free, gcatoolkit.org if you're interested out there. And where small businesses, whether it be a pizza parlor or a tire shop, can go get free tools to protect themselves. So we want to partner at all levels of the ecosystem, and that rising tide lifts all boats. And so we want to protect the smallest businesses, work with nonprofits, work across sectors, work with our government partners, and then work with other financial institutions.
Thank you very much, and it's great that you mentioned the work of civil society and non-governmental actors more broadly, because as we are discussing public-private partnerships, I do feel that they are often understood just as really the public, the private, the state, and the company, but it's broader. And many, and I feel especially in like NGOs working on cybersecurity or cyber policy have matured greatly in past couple of years, and we see their contribution, whether it's on open source investigation, threat intelligence, or also understanding the context of certain victims. You mentioned small and medium-sized enterprises, but also NGOs are being attacked on a big scale, and they do have their specific needs, very short of resources at the same time. And then you have NGOs helping NGOs oftentimes, and driving these kind of partnerships. And I wanted to wrap this round of questions on partnerships with you, Leroy, representing Moody's. How do you also see the cooperation? What is interesting, we mentioned that not only vertical cooperation is very important, but also horizontal between different sectors at the same level, especially those who have shared problems and also shared interests. And in these discussions, inevitably, we come to information sharing and how information sharing is important and how trust is important. How do you find it as private sector? What do you need? Because from states to have this trust as a private company. Not speaking globally, not every country engages the same way. And I would like to broaden the circle of one thing is a transparent, cooperative, friendly government. The other is sharing information and working on tackling cybercrime with other governments, which may have. What are the issues that you are seeing in different kind of partnerships globally?
So I'm going to focus on the word trust that you use, which I think is a really important word. And before I give my answer, I just want to say that Moody's is a credit rating agency, so we're not cyber evangelists, we are not cyber crusaders. Our job is very specifically, in case there are regulators in the room, to give credit ratings that allow investors to make good decisions. So as a byproduct of some of the work that we do, I'm very happy to say that I think that we are moving the needle on encouraging the entities that we rate to adopt better cyber practices, because we think that it will have a financial impact on the organizations. And one of the ways that we're able to do that is, just as you said, using trust. So Moody's is over a century year-old organization. We've been providing credit ratings for a long time, and we have relationships with a number of different entities that we rate over decades in many cases. And so because of that relationship, we are able to ask them questions about their cybersecurity practices, what they're doing to protect themselves, what types of technologies they're using, and they're more willing than they might be with other organizations to discuss that with us. It wasn't necessarily true at the beginning. When they started getting questions from a credit rating agency about cybersecurity, some organizations found that a little bit odd. But we've overcome that hurdle, and we actually have a sort of biannual at this point cyber survey that we send to the entities that we rate all around the globe, and we ask them about 90 questions on their cybersecurity practices. So one of the ways that we're able to collaborate and provide value is using that data. Data scarcity is a continual issue with cybersecurity, and we've heard of a number of regulations and rules have been put in place by governments because they want to get a better sense of the problem, what's happening, and how they can address it and tackle it. And so leveraging the information that we're able to get based on the trust that we have with our customers, we package that information together and we share it with many different entities in the private sector, but also in the public sector. And we've seen the research that we've provided show up in things like the IMF research, from CISA, from the Bank of France. So we are glad that some of this information is making its way into policymakers' hands so that they can make more informed decisions about cybersecurity. Another way that we're able to collaborate is through the InfraGard, which is an FBI-led organization where private sector entities can exchange intel. And so our CISO office is very happy to participate in that and finds it a fruitful collaboration. And then another way that we're able to collaborate is because our analysts at Moody's, they're financial experts. They've spent many years looking over balance sheets and income statements, but they're not necessarily technology experts. And now we're asking them to engage with the entities that they rate on cyber risk issues. And so they might be a little bit uncomfortable with that. And so as a way of increasing their comfort level, we reach out to law enforcement, we reach out to other public sectors to give some insight into what the landscape looks like for cyber threats. And so a year or two ago, we had a field trip in Manhattan to the FBI field office with our public sector rating analysts to understand what the threat is to local governments so they could better take that into account when they were speaking with these entities and giving them credit ratings. So lots of collaboration happening, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to hear about all the partnerships which are already happening, and I do feel that we still stay in the comfort zone, describing functioning partnerships with countries which are very open to partnerships, and then there is the global landscape of information sharing and partnerships which is happening outside of that trusted circles, and how do we and the question of safe havens and how to actually get to cyber criminals which are being harbored in this way. But I'm very happy that we've heard that many success stories, and I do have the last question for our panelists, but I wanted to offer a chance to our audience whether you have questions for our speakers. And I see some. Can we get a mic? Thank you.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you. So my question is maybe directed to Europol. You've been doing a great job, and do you think you lack investment or manpower to do that at a much bigger scale, to solve more cases?
Thank you very much. And if you have next questions, then please also introduce yourself very briefly so we know from whom is the question coming.
Well, never ask this question to a law enforcement officer. No, sure. If I have the double of budget and the double of staff, maybe I could do the triple of what we do. We are working on it. But yes, for sure. We would like to do more. We would like to have more partners. We would like to see more countries, more law enforcement agencies cooperating. We have the good ones around the table, those with which we are achieving things, but there are a lot that we have to convince sometimes to raise also their capabilities. And I know that I was in the RSA conference in San Francisco. Shortly I heard that the US have a strategy now about digital solidarity, if I heard about trying to raise the level of cyber awareness, cyber security in all the world. I think that it's important because we cannot have kind of loopholes in some countries. Safe havens we have, loopholes, if we can avoid, it should be better. So yes, well, if we could have more, it would be nice, but maybe after the next Sunday and the European election, who knows?
Pavlina, we'll take this as an opportunity to point out, in the US, we have a very tight budget right now. Times are tough, but at least in the Department of Justice, with the FBI and my section, we actually got increased in cybersecurity. So there has been a commitment from the administration to increase the budget going to Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, FBI parts that are focusing on cybercrime. And I think that comes from a recognition that more resources are needed in this space across the board.
If I could add too, and I think that's why the partnership piece is so important. Governments don't have unlimited budgets. Private sector doesn't have unlimited budgets. But together, you know, we can, again, add our resources, combine them. We have subject matter experts in things like forensics and payments. You know, we can bring capacity and expertise to the table, lean on our partners in the government sector to provide intelligence and information. So again, I think that's why this conversation is so important and why action following this conversation is so important, because it allows us to be more efficient with the dollars or euros that we all do have.
Great. Anyone wants to join?
Yeah, just I add also something. Well, just to say that we have had an augmentation in our staff and so on in the past multi-annual European framework. So, but we could have more. Now, what I wanted to say is about the talent gap, what you mentioned. We have also a gap in talent. So we need to train people and to have people that are trained. And so it's why it's important also to have all the programs to educate more and more people to cybersecurity at all levels, including our citizens, because they are the main target sometimes. But we need also to have the relevant talent in our organization also. And sometimes there's a bit of competition around the talents to know where they will go.
Are you looking at me?
Thank you very much. Do we have more questions? We could take one more, but I do have a question which I really wanted to ask you. So I'm really happy that we still have some minutes to address it, and we'll just like get it like as around the table. Starting with you, Leroy, if you're fine with this. Future outlook. What are the emerging threats we are seeing? How is AI changing the landscape? It is, after all, the title of our conference this week. What does it mean for the partnership? So when the cybercrime landscape is becoming more complex, do the partnerships need to upgrade, and how can they upgrade? And take it from your perspective. For the organizations you represent and for the great experiences that you bring to this panel. Please, Leroy.
Yes, so I'll start by quoting a figure from the IBM cost of a data breach study they do annually. And according to that study, organizations that reached out to law enforcement organizations and collaborated with them when they experienced some sort of cyber incident saved about 10% on their recovery costs and were able to reduce the length of the breach by about a month, 33 days. So it's clear that continued collaboration with law enforcement is important from a credit standpoint, credit rating agency standpoint. We're again concerned about the financial impact. You know, we don't give recommendations, but from what we can see in the past, collaboration with law enforcement is a good idea for organizations if they want to reduce the cost of these incidents. As we're seeing these new technologies come on board, we expect that there will be a lot of positive results coming from that, but also a number of threats. And so I do think the partnerships will have to evolve to keep pace with that.
Yeah, just to pivot off something Leroy said, you know, there was an operation that we undertook with the FBI and international partners last year to go after the Hive ransomware group. And when we gained access to their control panel, we could see their list of victims, the amount of money they were demanding from those victims. We could see who had paid. And the FBI has actually quoted that looking at that list of victims, they already knew about 10 to 15% of them. So that's 85% best case scenario of victims who the FBI had no clue were victims. And that just shows a very low level of reporting that's coming from a lot of these victims out there. And it's something we're really trying to fix. Fortunately, on the horizon in the United States, we have some legislation coming in, which we call CERCIA, and don't ask me to say what that means or spell that out, but that will mandate reporting from victims going forward sometime in fiscal year 2025. I would really be interested to see, once we get that influx of reporting, whether that enables us to take further actions against these groups, because we'll now know about them, we'll know about the infrastructure they're using, and be able to go after them more aggressively. Time will tell.
So I mentioned earlier in the conversation that we, in the financial industry, haven't seen high-speed AI attacks, but it doesn't mean we haven't seen any AI attacks yet, right? And so we realize we are in an arms race against the threat actors who are leveraging this technology. And so, we have to think about it in three ways, really. One, obviously, what are the threats, right? How do we see those threats progressing, and how are we going to defend against them? Two, how are we going to protect AI technologies that we're using as corporations or as even the public sector that are different and act different than our current technologies that we're using? And then three, how are we going to leverage those AI technologies to protect ourselves, right? We have to stay at pace with the threat actor. So, again, we are already beginning to do that. If you think about fraud, anti-fraud technologies and things, when we leverage AI, we have about twice the detection rate for fraud that we had previously. I mentioned a figure of $100 million in 2017. That was $20 billion last year that we saved in fraud attacks by leveraging AI technology. So, but that's not something we need to hide under a bushel. We need to share these advances amongst each other so we can protect the entire ecosystem from top to bottom, because those threat actors are not going to just pick on large corporations. They're going to pick on the smallest and most vulnerable, those small and medium-sized businesses. They're going to attack countries, nation states. They're going to try to influence elections. As we all know, they're coming up. They're even going to try to besmirch the International Olympic Committee, as we're here in Paris. We've seen just in the last week deep fake threats, or deep fake, attacks against the IOC. So again, it really is going to take everyone here up here, all of our organizations, and the entire ecosystem of the good guys working together to defeat those new threats.
Maybe I would like to take 3 points. Well, the first point, this morning I heard one of the speakers saying that the AI will be a better advantage for the defender than for the attackers. Well, for the law enforcement, so far, we need to work on that, because we don't have the legal framework to use due to privacy issues, data protection issues, and so on. We don't have the tools to use fully AI to counter the AI that are used by the criminals. So maybe in cybersecurity, AI will be an advantage for the defender. I'm a bit afraid that for law enforcement, it will be more difficult to get to that. So, but we need to work on that, and to have the possibility that for law enforcement we can use AI tools to counter the threats. The second point is that this morning I heard another speaker saying something about the fact that the human factor is the weakest point in cybersecurity. I think it's right, and I think that we have to work on that. That is to say, working on human factor, meaning for us, working on the victims, trying to prevent, to educate, including our citizens, and trying also to make them able to recover their data when they have been attacked and so on. I just mentioned that we have a website. It's more than 5 years, maybe more, that it exists. No More Ransom. It's a website that is where you can find decryption tools for the main ransomware that has been issued. So it's free. It's in 27 languages, I think. So you can go and upload, download a decryption tool. And the third point that I want to take to refer to this operation Kronos about Logbit, to say that partnership is a big value, because in this operation, well, the main technical part was done by our NCA colleagues. In Europol, we did the cooperation, more the coordination of the action. More of 11 countries was involved. In the US, the indictment was done by the US DOJ, including a sanction, because the main actor of Lockbit has been mentioned on the OFAC sanctions list. So we really team up to get a result, and a clear result, because this guy now is his name is well known by everybody, because he has been attributed to this. So this is working. This is working, the partnership, but we need to develop it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So I might just try and bring us back where we started a little bit, because a lot of what we've heard, it's arguably been one of the most successful years for us as a collaboration in terms of the operations we've delivered. So be it through Hive, Genesis, Lockbit, there's more and more that we can think of. Was it LabHost recently, Endgame? These are all really big, substantial impacts on the cybercriminal ecosystem. But sadly, the threat continues to go up. And that's really, really concerning, isn't it, when we come back to that point of scale? So I definitely support Mike's really valuable point earlier, that our capacity and our capability, we should treat that as a threat, and we need to accelerate into that in terms of upskilling our people and our societies as a whole as well. But fundamentally, we know that cyber criminals and threat actors, they're pretty good collaborators, and I think the only way we win that war is to be better collaborators ourselves. So I guess thank you to my colleagues for that collaboration, and thank you to everyone in the room for that collaboration too. And thank you.
Thank you very much. It was the perfect closing for our panel. So I just thank the audience again. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for asking questions. And thank you to the speakers. It was a wonderful discussion we had today. And I really hope that it's a great value also as we look forward to we look for future partnerships and how to prepare for the future. So thank you very much.